You are live. We just have to have that awkward part now where we've got 20 seconds while we wait for the post to come up and see if they actually do come up. I'm like a broken record discussing this at the start of every LinkedIn Live. As we wait.
Yeah, well, this is a good place for conversations like this. I don't. My group doesn't really get involved with. There's a little bit of crossover between. I mean, Dota is just all on Twitter, and then like the business people are on LinkedIn, but they also read Twitter as well. But like no players. There's like very few players that are on LinkedIn or even look at LinkedIn.
Yeah, and I think it's probably a good place to start the conversation, right? We're talking a bit off microphone as we're waiting for more people to join in. We're talking about finding business-minded players. And I was telling you before we chatted, I've been trying pretty solidly for a year to find some top-level business-minded players to talk to me, and there's just isn't many of them. And I think it's super common for people who work in the business side, like me, to have an us versus them, to be like, well, why wouldn't a player be business-minded? You want to make money, don't you? But you were explaining that why would you give up an opportunity to become a better player by taking time, traveling, doing unboxings, reviews, podcasts, and things like that?
Yeah, you only have so many hours in a day, so it's about where you invest your time. And unfortunately, like esports is such a buzzword that 99% of the opportunities that come to you are literally they're just pieces of crap. Like they're not worth your time in the first place. So unless you have somebody to filter that for you, or you have experience in the world to kind of recognize which ones are good and which ones are bad, obviously they all have risk. But it takes a lot of time to get through it all and find good things, because even like a business podcast or something like that, I don't really listen to business podcasts, so I have no idea if this is like even relevant, or if it's does anybody watch this, or does do you know what I mean, or do a ton of people watch it?
Yeah.
You just don't know the audience, you don't know if it'll ever come back to you. So I try to just do a little bit here and there when I'm not fed up with it, so it's all good.
I listened to a podcast once. I can't remember who it's with. It's with an NBA player who's quite into VC these days, and I believe he's also invested into esports. And
Nice.
when he was first trying to get into investing, he was trying to get VCs to help him, and everyone would say no. And I thought their analogy was really good, and I think this works too for players. So basically, a VC sat him down once and said, "Look, mate, I would not request for you to come and help me at my Wednesday night mixed basketball for free, and to come and teach me how to shoot hoops for free. That's your profession. And I'm all at the same stage. I'm not going to go to try to play NBA against you. But if you're coming into the investment space, we're very serious in this space. This is 100% of our lives. So it's like you coming into the VC investment space is like me trying to randomly step into the NBA space. And I think that people don't understand that in business as a player, like you're explaining, you're hyper-focused all the time on simply playing and getting better and being part of that ecosystem, that you're not exposed to the business ecosystem whatsoever. There's terms you don't understand. There's people you need to talk to, and connections that maybe you should have made if you want to get into business that you haven't, because you've been busy mingling, with the next mid laner. You've been busy doing scrims and pugs and being part of that ecosystem instead. And there's so much information that you're missing, but rightfully so if you're trying to focus on, getting that top 4 placement at TI or number 1.
Yeah,
for sure. We got a few people joining in here as well. El, Averind, Nico.
Were you gonna send me the link?
Yeah, I did. I just showed you the link through.
Okay, great.
Good to see Herb May back again. Averind, Nico, and El. We'll get those social links out there. So I think an easy way to start the conversation, Peter, for anyone watching, and we're going to be repurposing this into a podcast as well. Can you give the quick, very basic rundown of what it's like being a Dota player commercially? Obviously, you're a player, you're contracted to a team, you're playing in tournaments. What's the basic of your life looking like contract-wise and tournament-wise?
Well, contract-wise, most teams do kind of it's like everything is just yearly based in Dota, and it revolves around the international, which is the tournament that happens, like the $30 million tournament that happens once a year in around August. Contracts usually begin in September and end at the end of that tournament. And Yeah, it just goes year by year base, and I've had the opportunity to play for lots of different teams. I played on Optic, who was in Dallas. I'm now playing on NIP, who was in Sweden. I was on EG, who was in California. And every time I would switch to a new team, I myself would pick up and move to that new city so I could become a more integral part of that company and rub shoulders with employees and get to know people and develop relationships to just to help further my own, I guess, what's the social capital within the
Mm,
team. Just
yeah,
because, uh, as you know, I'm like the captain and the leader of my team, and organizations come to me because teams inside Dota are organically built by the players within them. So people come to me thinking, we're an organization and we want to have a Dota team. What you got to find is a leader in Dota, a captain who teams form around, and that's somebody I am. So I've always had a lot of leverage going into those negotiations, and people are excited to hire me. So after the international, you field X amount of offers depending on how popular you are and how much people want you, and you just make the best decision and try to find the best fit. A lot of times it's region based. Sometimes, if you want to play in Europe, you want to find a European organization. North America, same thing.
mm.
Southeast Asia, whatever. Those organizations are more equipped in those areas to take care of you better than they could elsewhere. And you got to take all that into account, along with salaries, prize pool cuts, um, and overall, just like, do you believe in this organization? Right? Like, there's a ton of esport teams that are, a bunch of upcoming people who are trying to start, and Dota is one of the games because of Valve's kind of, there's they're there on the outside letting people kind of participate. They didn't lock anything up. They didn't franchise it. There's
Yeah.
opportunity of entry inside Dota and CS:GO, and that's what makes and that's one of the reasons why Dota is such an appetizing game for esport teams to get involved with.
So when you're choosing an organization to play for, are they giving you free reign then to find your other players? How often are they becoming part of the recruitment process and things like that as you're forming your team?
It depends on their experience in the game. NIP, when I joined, didn't really have a lot of experience in the game. They had a team once before. I think it was like 2 years ago before I joined, that didn't
Hmm.
work out particularly well. Fact of the matter is, most of the time, these organizations just don't have the same knowledge of the space that someone like myself would. So if they can convince themselves to believe in me, I kind of have full reign and power to make changes, decide what regions we want to play in, kind of do whatever. They trust me to make the best decisions possible for myself, which will also be the best for them. And that's just winning and being a successful team, because there's not a lot more. There's the best thing for any esports organization, I think. I mean, obviously you got to have your business together. You can't go bankrupt, but a successful team will take you farther than anything else.
And I guess you were talking about like the free flowing nature of Dota 2 and like pulling apart one thing you said at the end that I know as a fan that people watching might not necessarily know is that there's one big tournament a year, the international, which is, anywhere up to 35 million USD prize pool. And after that, you've got the post TI shuffle where players are pinging all over the place quite often. There's organizations that are losing whole teams, that are losing one or two players. You've got Team Liquid, ex-Team Liquid making their own organization. You've got almost every single Dota 2 team is picking up and dropping 1, 2, 3, 4 players at a time. What do you think about that for the stability of the scene or the teams in regards to their competitiveness? Is it a strong drive for you as a captain to keep your team together as much as possible, to keep that same five for years to come?
I don't know about the same five. It really just depends on your success. Like, if I'm on a team that's not having a ton of success, it might make sense for me to try and make some changes, because sometimes a new roster change can be revitalizing for a team's morale. It also, you could just find a better player who's has more skill and can take you farther. So changing rosters
Mm,
isn't necessarily a bad thing. I think it is really nice to keep a core of players together. So if you can find a couple of people who, you know, have the same kind of thinking and align with you, going into the international, playing in the international, hopefully, and then when you go out into that roster mania, if you can have three players locked in it's really easy to find those next two. It's when you're down to like one or two people and everybody's getting different offers from everywhere. There's only you play one position. There's only one spot available on these teams if they're looking for X
Mm.
position. So it's if you have a core of people together, it's really easy to find those last two. If you got one or two, it can be pretty tough to put together a full roster because everybody's just busy fielding offers all over the place, and who knows where they're going to end up.
And like I used to play, semi pro Counter Strike in Australia. Obviously not at your level in Dota, but the easiest way for me to explain that is, my team always had a core 3 or a core 4, and quite often it was our leader, and then it was 2 people that would hold a bomb site together. Do you find that's fairly similar in Dota? It's the kind of the carry and the support player. They follow each other around, or is there any sort of general formula?
No, I don't think there's a real general formula right now. I mean, the captain, I think, is generally almost always part of the core, just because they're a leader for a reason. They have that leadership skill, which is very, very unique in Dota, mostly because I think a lot of people are a little bit introverted that play video games and aren't so outspoken
Mm.
and social. Um, for me, it was just I used to be just a player, because I was just an up and comer. I was like kind of nervous playing with people. I just wanted to be as good as them, and at some point, things just stopped happening for me, and I kind of just had to take control of my own situation. And instead of backing down in that position, I rose to the challenge and just took
Mm.
control and became a leader. And people admired that, and it got me much further than I had gotten before, and so I've just kept at it. And now it's not a question when I join a team who is the leader. It's going to be me. Um, sorry, what was your original question? To get back to it,
Yeah, no, I think
you're
that
talking about
pretty.
no, you're talking about the core of the team. So my
Yeah, the
core
core
of
of
the
the
team
team.
is
Yeah.
me and Sahil or Universe, and him and I had played previously together on EG back in 2014 to 2016. And he's a little bit older as well. I think he's like 30. I'm 28, and then our other teammates are
Mm.
between like 22 and 19. So we kind of have like we're like older and experienced guys, and we're definitely the core of the team, the two of us. The rest of the guys are pretty up and coming, and there's they're still trying to reach their potential and stuff. And um, I wouldn't make a decision about the team without him. And I think that when you're in that position, I think it does kind of create that nice bond and strengthen a team. And it just feels better knowing that like your teammates have your back.
So you mentioned like often when you're signing with these different teams, e.g., Optic, NIP, you follow them around country to country. It's been quite common in the past for players to always live in the same house together in a team house, and now it seems to be going more towards facilities and boot camps. Do you have a preference? Can you weigh in on one versus the other?
Yeah, I definitely prefer the like living in an apartment and then traveling to work to go to the office for the boot camp. I'm very, very lucky that I have an apartment in Stockholm. So when we do our boot camps in Stockholm, I can stay in my apartment rather than staying in a hotel or a team house or something like that. Um,
Mm.
and it just really depends on your team and it depends on the players. We've got a lot of young guys. Most of them live at home with their parents. So a team house would be a better and more realistic option for them. You could have a cleaning service come in. You could have someone help them with their laundry, like cook meals for them, all that kind of stuff. But I'm a little bit older. I have experience living on my own, and I prefer it that way. I enjoy my time away from my team and away from the
Mm.
game much more now than I did when I was younger. Mostly just because I've grown up and I've started to think about lots of different things rather than when I was younger, more so their age, and all I thought about was Dota. It didn't bother me, where I was sleeping, what I was doing. I would dream about Dota. I'd wake up, ready to play another game, and I'd say that like that thirst has kind of it's kind of gone down a bit as I've aged up.
Yeah, and I think it's a common question I've asked myself. As there was a period of time when I was trying to go pro in CS:GO and be one of the best in the world. Is I've got a girlfriend at the time. I was 20, 21, and wanted a dog. Is it reasonable for me to live with a bunch of 18-year-olds that maybe don't pick up after themselves and such? But is it worth that trade-off because of the team cohesion? You get to live in with those people. You're with them every day. Does that help for
Depends on the team.
gameplay?
Depends how well they get along. Sometimes space is helpful. Sometimes taking a break from your teammates. We're in an incredibly high stress environment, super competitive. Everybody's, you fight for your spot on that team every day. If you're not up,
Mm.
if you're not cutting it, then you're gonna find yourself not on the team next year, or maybe even next month. So it's pretty cutthroat because we're competing for $40 million throughout the year, and it's an opportunity of a lifetime to do that. And if somebody's not giving it their all, you don't want that person on your team.
Is there a window of time? Say you cut a player and bring a new one in. What's the window of time as to when you think you're operating at 100% again? Is it easy to sub in and out a player?
I think it's pretty easy to sub in and out players. Everybody kind of speaks the language of Dota at that highest level already,
Mm.
and a lot of times teams kind of adapt to their newest player rather than the newest player adapting to the team. And oftentimes that can actually build a lot of focus within a team, which is really helpful. Um, like some of the best TI runs have been done by teams who formed right before the international, just because
Mm.
it was simple, it wasn't complicated. They didn't have a bunch of baggage from previous events throughout the year. They kind of just had a fresh start and they said, "Hey, let's go for it." And yeah, they did it.
Yeah, makes sense to me. Is there actually no? I don't need to ask that question. Sorry, I'm just getting overwhelmed. There's so many people asking questions in the chat, trying to keep up with it all at once, which is fantastic. So let's take a bit of a change of pace and talk about more with you in the business side of things. You had a bit of a stint as the CEO of an esports team, Evil Geniuses, which for a while I believe was functioning as a player-owned organization while you were a player and CEO.
Yeah, I believe they still have player owners to this day. So, like many other teams in Dota, the players are involved on the equity side of the company.
What's the day to day for you like when you're like you're saying you're basically playing for your life every day, but then also having to be involved in business situations? Does that put it in the too hard basket fairly quickly for you, or are you able to manage it?
Well, I was working with Phil Aram, who's their COO currently,
Mm-hmm.
and while he was on the team, he was our Dota manager. But then him and I were also working on the divestment from Amazon of the Evil Geniuses company to being owned by the players and him as well. And he kind of managed most of that while I was acting as a player. And then when I stopped playing in 2016 for a year, when I took over the job as CEO, he went back to still helping me with the divestment side, but mostly just being focused on the Dota team. And I kind of handled the other parts of EG, which managing payroll, merchandise, signing of new rosters, getting into new games, content, you name it, I had a hand in it. It was CEO is pretty much a jack of all trades position, so I learned a lot about a lot of different things in that year.
Do you think it's something we'll see other teams picking up in the future or other organizations? Like, I mean, it makes sense that might be common in Nigma or solo team organizations, or maybe even EG in the past when they were only Dota 2. But it to me it seems surprising that EG being such a older organization, been around for a long time in the ecosystem, would pinpoint a player as being the CEO as well with that extra added pressure.
I think EG was I didn't play, so that the pressure of playing was gone during that year.
Mm.
Um,
Okay, right.
I was kind of the person pushing for a lot of it, and I was an active part in on that side. I think when I first joined EG and we started getting our first salaries, I was very confused and unsure about the amount that we were being paid, and I just wanted to know why we were being paid that amount. Not that it was low, not that it was high. I just, you always went to say, "Hey, I wanted to get paid this much," and they said, "We can't do it," or, "Oh yeah, we can do that, no problem," right? It's like, where
Mm.
is that number exactly? And in esports, it's really vague, especially with a multi sport or multi esport team org. It's like,
Mm.
how much of your advertising budget is responsible, or how much of your advertising revenue is the Dota team bringing in versus the Counter Strike team or
Mm.
the fighting game players, right? How do you is it 80%? Is it 90%? Is it 50%? You really it's really hard to figure that out. And so you can't like kind of just like split it up and say, hey, we're making $1 million and 80% is from the Dota players. So we're gonna split the $800,000 and give that to the 5 Dota players as their salary.
Mm.
Um, it's a little hard to do that. but I was always trying to figure it out, and that kind of led me to get more involved on the business side, and eventually led to me um, kind of taking over. It was a little bit complicated because my team didn't really want to play with me anymore in that year, so it was like they kicked me from the team, but I was kind of the person doing all the business stuff anyways. So I just kind of went there for a year, and then after a year, I just determined that I just wasn't ready, and it just wasn't really what I was interested in doing at that time. So I stepped away and went back to being a player.
Yeah, something you said there is something I think about so often. I did a podcast with an organization owner here in Australia, and one of his new investors and board asked him to do a profit and loss statement per team. And that stuck with me for a long time, exactly like what you were saying. You know, is their CSGO team bringing in enough compared to their League of Legends team? And, you know, often you find sponsors, say like Logitech, will say, you have to have a CSGO team. That's why we're sponsoring you, because we're releasing a mouse that's tailored towards CSGO. Or, you know, working for Corsair in the past, it's kind of like, hey, can we work with more teams in Dota, or releasing an MMO mouse who want to get into World of Warcraft, or certain influencers and things like that too. So there's always, like you were saying, there's always so many factors in the background. And the more I talk to you, the more I think about it. Often I feel like it's the factor of the business people simply don't ask the players or tell the players what's going on. And there seems to be sometimes a bit of divide. Do you agree with that?
I think, yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people are really busy. A lot of times the organizations don't want to trouble the players with involving them on things outside of them just competing in the games, because the teams performing well is ultimately the most important thing for them. Bringing in the players to talk and have an opinion on all those sorts of things, maybe some of the players would care about, most of them probably wouldn't, and a lot of them would see that as kind of like, oh, why are we doing this? Like, I don't want to bother.
So we talked a bit before going live as well about business-minded players, and we talked a bit about the start of the podcast as well. Can you give me a quick rundown of a few different typecasts of Dota 2 players, and the kind of personalities that you see in the market?
Sure. Well, honestly, most of the Dota players are just hardcore Dota players. They are only really interested in just playing Dota. Most of them don't even like live stream their games, just because it's a distraction. Live streaming can be a bit exhausting, and they just want to put all of their energy towards becoming a better Dota player, so they can go to the international and win the international and make $5 million. So anything that kind of prevents them from placing better at the international is arguably a waste of their time. And that's why like brand building inside of Dota isn't very popular. That's kind of why it's hard for esport orgs to get involved, because teams are constantly reshuffling to it's not just we're going to change a player out. It's, we're going to get a whole new roster, and we're going to play on a different part of the world next year. And we had a really good year. Now we have all these offers from all these other orgs and stuff. So a lot of the orgs nowadays, at least the big ones that are willing to pay you, the big money, they want to sign people up on multi-year long contracts, and that can be really difficult to pull off. Yeah. There are some business-minded Dota players, but it's just very, very difficult for us to work together, because everybody is kind of just representing themselves inside of Dota. Because it'd be great if we all worked together to, I don't know, run our own events, establish a players committee and develop rules and handle punishments and do all that kind of stuff. But it's just hard to get everybody to work together, because everybody's just so invested in themselves because of the international.
So do you think?
Go ahead.
Yeah. Do you think that then most of these problems come down to the fact of TI and it's waiting on the year of Dota?
Yeah, I think it does come down to TI. I don't think that it's a problem. I think that it's just really different. I think Dota is the players in Dota are incredibly powerful. Not that we take advantage of all the power, but I think that's why a lot of team orgs kind of shy away from it, because you can just kind of do whatever you want whenever you want as a Dota player, and I don't think that exists as much in other games. So
yeah, and we talked about this a bit off the recording as well as on, about that, like the word you said, social capital, and relying on that. And to me, and going into what you were saying about being the team captain and given the responsibility to bring the players around you. I feel like Dota is maybe less of a business and more of a player/friendship environment than some other teams and some other games you're seeing, like League of Legends, for example, which seems to me from the outside is very contractual, very much like traditional sports. And I guess that's the way I would break down what you were saying.
Yeah, and it's a little bit unfortunate because it does kind of stunt the growth, especially of people from outside the game coming in. Most of the
Mm,
players are not building their brands. You go on to Dota 2 operates entirely on Twitter, and the amount of professional players that tweet per day is like less than 10. And there's like 1,000 pro players, and just nobody really. It's not that people don't care. It's just not worth their headspace. It's just not incentivized at all, and
mm,
they don't really draw. They don't like. It's funny. It's so funny because I always tell people, or at least I tell their players, I've been a big pusher in trying to help players and teams recognize the power that we have in this space, which is all of it, or just about all of it, in my opinion. It's like, do you
hmm
follow NIP on Twitter? And most of them are like, no, why would I follow NIP? Like, what? Like, they're just some company that, pushes products. They're like, do you follow ESL? No, like, once again, it's just another company pushing advertisements, and it's kind of shielded and hidden around running esport tournaments that you're supposed, that you care about. But then it's like, do you follow PPD? Do you follow Arteezy? Do you follow Sumail, the biggest names in Dota? And it's like, of course you follow them. Everybody follows them. And if these players would just get together and tell people where the party was, people would show up to that party. And that's kind of the power of eyeballs and attention, which is what all of this operates around. But because of lack of organization and lack of education and lack of effort, the players don't really take advantage of that power. And we just kind of sit
mm,
around and let the third parties, we let the middlemen, we let the tournament organizers, the team organizations, we kind of let them handle the stuff that we aren't willing to set up for ourselves. And you talked a little bit about like players setting themselves up for the future and owning, parts of their company and things like that. And those are the opportunities that a
mm,
lot of us are leaving on the table, just because we're more focused on placing better at the international, which it makes sense and it doesn't make sense. It depends on how short-sighted you are versus, building for your future, because the amount of work that you put into kind of developing all that may lead to you placing worse at the international, which, if you build a successful team organization like Team Secret or Team Nigma, where you have an ownership stake in it, you can build
mhm.
for your future and you can have a career beyond your play, or you can have a career beyond playing. um, or you could just win the international and get $4 million, put that in an investment account, make 10% a year, and just be sitting pretty for the rest of your life. It's
Mm,
and the requirements for that are just to play a lot of Dota, which is something you're already very comfortable with doing. You've been doing it for
mm.
10 years, and it's fun. Um, and so most people choose that option, which makes a lot of sense to me.
Do you think a lot of those problems can be solved by better player agents or by even, say, the Team Liquid model where they've got an agency inside them called Liquid Media?
Yeah. Yeah, if the players are willing to, but the thing is, it still has to come from the players. Like, Team Liquid isn't going to build. I mean, they're going to try to build the brand of the players, but at the end of the day, like, it's kind of on those players themselves to do what Liquid's recommending to them. Like, they kind of need to propel
Mm,
themselves. And I think like No Tail, for example, is doing a really good job. He just went to Peru to go to some gaming event and meet fans, and
mm,
he does like he's got like somebody handling his YouTube channel and tries to live stream every once in a while, and he's kind of really, pushing his brand out there. I think that, um, but he's not playing actively at the moment, so he's got time to do it, and he's got the headspace for it. It's just, we're just very, very busy. It's hard to do other stuff, and I don't think that, like, I just don't even think players would give a player agent like you're talking about the time of day. Like,
mm.
it's just impossible to get involved. You talked about how hard it is to get high profile esport players that are business minded on a podcast like this. It's the same thing with, with player agents trying to find people.
Yeah, and I think from the business outset, it seems like an easier problem than it is. I've worked with influencers who are exactly the same before,
I'm
who
not sure.
you
If,
know
I'm not sure.
they're
If, I'm not sure if it's a problem. It's
yeah.
it just is how it is.
Sorry, yeah. What to basically to phrase it, the problem I'm saying is I mean, a lot of the time, I think people in business look at a player and say, "You could be making so much money. Give me the reins. I'll help you make a lot of money." But it's not. It's not that easy. I think people look at Ninja and say, "Oh, he's got a lot of views. It must be easy to be his manager. Must just have all these contracts coming in. You're signing $10 million deals left, right, and center, and Ninja can sit back and relax." But it's not that case. It's the fact of once that's created, you still have to deliver. You still need to fly to Peru to do that thing, to take out that time. You still need to sign the contracts. You still need to sit in the room talking to people in suits that you don't want to meet and you don't want to be there. You'd rather be playing Dota and thinking about TI at the same time. So I think it's important to, think about it from the player side of things, which is exactly like what you're saying.
Definitely.
So we've got a lot of questions in the chat and a lot of them about player issues. I guess. Can you touch on what some of the biggest player issues are? There's always so many common threads in business of new taxation agents coming into esports. There's an umpteenth amount of new esports lawyers coming in that are talking about saving people from dodgy contracts. There's visa agents and visa issues. Are all of these common problems that you and your team face month to month, day to day?
I would not say common problems for us. I think a lot of the Western, at least the Western big orgs, are pretty developed at this point, where kind of shady stuff like maybe that is issues doesn't really happen. I know a lot of players are chasing money from like a Southeast Asian tournament organizer named GESC, but I think that they just like pretty much went bankrupt, and I think Valve is suing them. But I mean, people, the players talk amongst themselves, right? People message me, or if I was thinking about joining Team Liquid, I might message an ex-player on Team Liquid and say, "Hey, what was being on Liquid like?" And they would just probably tell me straight up, like, this was it good, was it bad, what was their issues, did they annoy you too much, did they try to take make you do too much media or whatever it might be, but I personally really haven't had too many issues. I've always gotten along with my team orgs, and I understand that it's a team effort on their side and my side to kind of bring more attention to the brand. And I think that when you both kind of have, like, as long as you're both aligned in that thinking, then there shouldn't really be any issues. Right? I get paid to promote them, and I'm going to promote them. It's my job.
Makes sense. So I'm just scrolling through. Got some interesting questions here coming in the chat about player agents. I mean, keeping on that same path, do you have a player agent yourself? Do you know of any within the Dota 2 scene that are any form of successful?
No, I don't have a player agent, and I did try working with a couple of lawyers in the space on that player agency side. Unfortunately, I wasn't very impressed. Mostly just like with their timeliness. Maybe they were busy with tons of other people or whatever it might have been. It just wasn't for me. I also think that I have more as ridiculous as this might sound, and maybe I sound a little bit arrogant. I don't think that any lawyer that's trying to work in esports has as much experience inside or with esport contracts, and especially in Dota 2, than I do. And I have experience dealing with contracts previously. Like we talked about my time on Evil Geniuses, being the CEO. And there's not really that many things to discuss. Like in Dota, it's like you negotiate your salary, you negotiate your prize pool cut. If you feel like you're going to be selling a lot of merchandise, which most people don't, I don't think a lot of esport companies do very well in merchandising, and especially like players, unless you're like some big brand like Shroud or Ninja or Lyric or something like that. But those guys
Mm-hmm.
are those guys have eclipsed. They're way bigger than esports, and I just don't think there's just nothing to do about it. I mean, every esports contract has like a like the terrible termination clause where they're like, if the esport org wants to end your contract tomorrow, they can do it, and everybody just signs up anyways. And I don't know, like, you just fight for your spot, and if you're good enough to be on the team, you're good enough to be on the team. And when you get kicked off the team, it's not because the org didn't want you; it's because your teammates don't want you.
What's the tier 2 scene of Dota 2 like? Is it something that needs development? I've seen a lot of discussion recently about it on Reddit and Twitter and things like that. I'd love to get your take on it.
Yeah, it depends if you want a different, like, so Dota is kind of like this big boys club. It's like the same 100 dudes that have just been traveling around the world, just raking in money left and right. And if you're one of those 100 dudes, it's a pretty good gig. Um,
Mm,
there isn't a lot of, I think we had like 20% turnover last year of players at the international, which honestly isn't that bad. But most of the people most of the people that you compete against, I've been competing against them for 6 years, right? And they were competing against each other even before then, and I was competing against
mm,
some of them in Heroes of New Earth. So it's been like the same guys. In order to really get better at Dota, you need to have that experience against those top players. So if you don't get the opportunity to either scrim them or compete in smaller tournaments against them, it's really hard to kind of take yourself to the next level.
mm,
Um, I tried starting it's a North American Dota Challengers League. It's NADCL. I started a tier like a league for amateurs and semi-professionals at the beginning of last year. I operated it for 3 seasons, so about, I don't know, six months of the year, and it was basically a place for like non-sponsored teams to compete and earn money. And the biggest problem with anything like minor league is if it's not connected or pipelined with a major league, or where the eyeballs and attention actually are, good luck ever getting people to watch it. Um, I
mm,
think give viewership for minor events is nearly impossible any way you try to do it. Um, unless you have like Arteezy and Sumail, like the biggest players in Dota, casting the event, nobody's really going to watch um, some random players they never heard about playing against each other. So
mhm,
that tier two events only really cater to like super fans and people that are like beyond invested into it, who just have way too much time on their hands. And there's not enough of those to warrant selling sponsorships for, which is like 90%, if not more, of esports revenue. And yeah, as a result, there's no money, so there's no one to do it. And people like to crutch on Valve and say it's Valve's responsibility to do everything inside of Dota, and yeah, maybe it is, and maybe the international has led us to, not be. It's distracted us from building it up ourselves. Um, but the cool thing that Valve did do is that they gave us all the opportunity to do it. Blizzard and Riot, they said
mhm,
nobody else can touch our product, nobody else can touch our IP. We're going to control all of it. We're going to do it ourselves. And Valve said, no, we don't want to do any of that. You guys can do whatever you want with Dota, but we're still going to run the international. But the international has made those kind of those third party efforts. It's kind of made them very difficult because all of the people, the players, the ones that the fans care about, they don't want to do anything that's not involved with the international. That's why we had the DPC get developed. That's why the third party events, ESL, DreamHack, PGL, MDL, they got the DPC points as a part of the DPC season, which creates ties with the international, which makes players care about, it makes fans care about. Um,
mm.
but it's hard to say if that system has been good for Dota. Um, it could look a lot different.
So, what's your thoughts on? There's a never-ending amount of companies now that are trying to create tournament platforms to spruik the Joe to Pro model. And when I talk to you, when I talk to old Counter Strike 1.6 players, when I talk to CS:GO players and ask them, "What's the path from Joe to Pro?" Generally, they say, "I don't know, just be good and play against other good people," which seems to be the sense of what you said as well. So, what does the Joe to Pro path look like for a new player who's 13 years old now, just watched TI9 for the first time and,
Sure.
wants to be on stage at TI11?
Well, it's pretty late to be completely honest, but people do get in. I know Gunner's on my team. He started in Dota 2. He's only been playing for, I don't know, 4 or 5 years, and he rose to the top pretty quick. I think Dota's pretty lucky because it has a matchmaking system built into the game and a ranking system built into the game. So if you find yourself in
Mm-hmm.
the top 10 on the ladder, I think you'll definitely get noticed, and people will definitely say, "Hey, who's that guy?" Um, the top 100 ladder is pretty much dominated by professional players. So if you can manage to break into that, people might give you a shot. Um, I don't know. It's if you're not playing video games and you just decide you want to be a pro gamer, that's just not going to happen. Like I tell people, like, when did I start like getting really good at video games? And it's like, I don't know, when I was 7 years old, when my dad bought me an N64 and Mario Kart, and I had to beat my little brother, otherwise I was less of a human than he was. or whatever it was. Like you need that
Yeah.
competitiveness, and you need to take all of the gaming seriously. So I grew up playing every game under the sun, and I wanted to be the best at it. So I found ways to strategize, maybe cheat, whatever I needed to do to get to the top, I would do it. So
Hmm.
that's kind of led me into the professional gaming career.
That's the first time I've ever heard someone say something like that, and it makes perfect sense. When you see, someone's one of the best NFL players in the world, soccer players, whatever, usually you ask them about their history, and they've been playing 6 sports since they were 3 years old. But no one ever talks about that in esports.
Even sports, I think, is helpful for esport players and stuff. It's just that fierce competitiveness. You're teaching your mind ways to beat other people's minds and their physical skill. Obviously, in professional sports, but most of that
Mm.
stuff is mental. I mean, physical sports have definitely a huge physical part, but you got to be smart. You got to be sports smart to get to the top. You got to be smart to use it, I guess.
A question I really wish I asked you before while we were still on that topic. CSGO players, it's been in the news, they denied a CSGO international that was proposed to them. Do you think it's the right move for them?
The players denied the international. Is that what they said?
Yeah. Yeah.
I didn't see the news. I think the CS:GO players have a pretty interesting setup. It's a little bit different than Dota. I think the CS:GO players make like much higher salaries, but they have less to play for throughout the year. They have tons of if they did do the CS:GO International, they might fall into the same trap that Dota is, where if your event isn't tied to the CS:GO International, then you you're not going to get the top teams at it, right? And as
Mm.
a result, like the CS:GO guys, they're going to events like almost every week. Those third-party tournaments would probably dry up pretty quickly because of lack of interest of the top teams, and there's only X amount of spots at each tournament. I think they go to a lot of like 6-team events, 8-team events, 4-team events, whereas Dota is, we do like 16-team events, and they're like the only events that exist. So we have to include everybody, and then the people that get left out, there's pretty much nothing for them. And if that happened in CS, a lot of the teams just wouldn't be able to make a living, and a lot of their sponsors of those teams wouldn't be able to attract any eyeballs, and inevitably there'd be less professional CS:GO players.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good answer. And there's obviously there's been so much discussion around burnout of players, especially in CSGO. Like you were saying, there's people that are flying from one championship to another that are, affecting their mental health and their stability as a team and their play. Is that something that is experienced in Dota, or is that being cleared up by the DPC points and the whole calendar being a little bit more aligned?
It's definitely experienced. The calendar is aligned, but we are incredibly busy. It's we go from let's say we boot camp for the qualifier, and then we play the qualifier. So I just got back from a 13-day long boot camp in Dallas. We practiced for like 4 or 5 to 6, maybe 6 days, and then we played the major qualifier, which was 3 days, and then we played the minor qualifier, which was 3 days. We only had to play 2 of them, and
Mm-hmm.
that was 2 weeks, right? I come home. I'm here. This is our biggest break of the year. We have like a 3-week break for Christmas, right? And then immediately I'm flying off again to go to Stockholm to play in another boot camp for like 2 or 3 days, and then we're going to the minor for a week. And if we win the minor, we fly straight from there to the major, and then after the major, we fly home. And the minor is like a week and a half long event. The major is like a 2-week long event, and then I would fly home, and then the next week we would start boot camp for the next qualifier, which would be another 2-week trip. So we're pretty busy in Dota if you're there competing at
Mm.
events, especially if you're the teams that have to play in the minors. On NIP last year, we played in I think 3 minors and we won 2 of them. So we did the minor to major to qualifier kind of roadie or rampage or whatever you want to call it. And I mean we're busy all year long, so we're definitely working hard for the money. In terms of like burnout and stuff, um, if you can't handle it, like we get paid a lot to do what we do, to play video games. So if it's not for you, like just step aside. Like there's thousands of people that would take your spot, in a minute.
Mm. And touching on that, we've had some questions in the comments. Can you touch on Dota 2 salaries around the world and also how they might compare to other esports titles?
I think that we have much lower than probably League of Legends and Counter Strike. Otherwise, I think we're up there as well. I think those are the three: Dota, CS:GO, and League of Legends are the biggest three esports in the world, and
Mm.
they're probably paid respectively the same, or not the same, but maybe I don't know. I don't know what league people get paid, but I know CS:GO is pretty high, and Dota.
NALCS starting salary is about 300K a year.
Okay, yeah. So League is probably the highest. CS:GO is probably second, and then Dota is probably third. It just depends on where you are, how much success you've had, what region you're competing in. Money is a lot different in different parts of the world.
Mm.
Some people pay a lot in taxes, others don't. Um, I'm not really sure how to answer that question, but if you're like a top Dota pro who's been competing at the international for years to come, like you're probably paid in the six figures, and you're pretty comfortable.
Mm. And it's
But most
interesting you were.
most of your money comes through prize money, which these other games don't have the opportunity to do. Like we get to compete at the international, right? So if you get
Mm.
not last, you make $100,000 in prize money, which is just you count that on top of your salary. And Dota pros that are finishing top 16 at the international are making more money than CS:GO pros and some League of Legends pros for sure.
Yeah,
And
and to get you to expand on this too, the model is flipped compared to what most people think, right? So like when most investors come to me, they think that owning an esports team is like owning a horse in horse racing, where you salary the jockey and you keep 99-ish% of the prize pool. Whereas if you're an organization and you're signing up PPD to play for you at the international, they're not keeping 99% of your prize pool.
no, definitely not. Those prize numbers, especially at the international, are between 0 and 10% max, I would say. And that's what we talked about, like the players kind of being a lot more powerful in Dota. Is like the team orgs, they need us because we own the space,
Mm.
and we're most of us, at least, like I would say like the captains on teams are probably the more business minded people, just because they have like that organizational, that leadership kind of skill, like Kuroki, Puppy, myself, No Tail, right? Like we're Fly even. We all, I think those are the guys that like handle, like, a lot of times, like, contract negotiations. My teammates rely on me to do them for them. So in a
Mm.
sense, like I'm almost their agent, I guess you could say. Um, and sorry, what was the question? We were, t-
I
we were,
think
t-
you,
we were talking
yeah,
about.
I think talking about salaries, talking about prize cuts,
Oh, I was
and
talking
the
about how
likeness from.
yeah, I think the players just have so much more power and opportunities to do whatever they want, go to the events that they want to go to. And I think as a result, and we talked about, like, it's really scary for organizations to get invested into Dota because, after the international next year, they might just not have a team. And all of let's say you put $800,000 of salaries into a team last year, and then all of a sudden, poof, they're gone. If you
Mm.
can't sign a 3, 4, 5 year contract, and you're trying to, like, organizations hire Dota teams to to connect their fan bases with the players on their team's fan bases. And if
Mm.
the players, get up and leave after year one or after year two, your entire investment goes straight down the hole. Like, those fans, those Dota fans that followed NIP because they were fans of my team and the players on my team. They're not fans of NIP. So when NIP
Mm.
leaves and I go join another organization, they're not going to stay with NIP. They're going to go to that new organization. And yeah, so all of that value is derived by the players.
Yeah, there's so many. I mean, like you've said so many times, there's just so many differences between Dota and everything else. And I think to pull out a lot of what you were saying about TI versus no TI, there's no right or wrong answer necessarily. It's the franchised and lockdown nature of
Yeah,
Overwatch and League versus
exactly.
the very open nature of
people
Dota.
people like to lump esports in all together. I think that, yeah, you can to some extent. They do have a lot of similarities, but Dota is
Mm.
pretty unique, and it's not necessarily, it's not like that buzzword esports that everybody is throwing around these days.
So, I mean, as a player, you have the stage now to talk to a bunch of business people. There's people in the chats that are running medium to large style esports companies. There's people listen to the podcast that are working in influential positions outside of esports that are gaining this information. I mean, as a player, what do you want these people to know that you think that they don't know and they should?
About Dota.
Yeah, about Dota, about esports, about anything about your experience as a player in the space.
Oh, wow. Well, there's huge opportunity if you're an honest, hardworking person. Uh, it's really hard to find people and hire in esports, especially because the people that you want are the people who know esports, and those people are people that didn't go to college and they stayed at home and they gave up their actual lives just to play video games. And
Mm,
unfortunately, also a lot of those people who did that are also just lazy, incompetent people. And yeah, they have the experience and they know what's going on, but they're not good workers. And a lot of those good workers have college degrees and, left their bedrooms and did other things and didn't just play video games all the time. But they don't really understand the space. So you got to find like a nice little mix and blend of those people. And if you do find those people, hang on to them for dear life, because they're few and far between in the space. And if you are one of those people and you know somebody, right? If you got a little bit of political connections, and you join an organization, you'll rise to the top very, very quickly. I grew up and I lived with a buddy of mine from high school. His name's Kodiak Schroyer. He he was we were living together in San Francisco, and he was a bartender. He had just gotten out of FEMA, which is like a volunteer organization that does disaster relief in Southern America. And he moved out to San Francisco with me, and I was running EG at the time. And I said, why don't you just quit your job bartending and you can come be our Call of Duty and fighting game manager, right? And he just did a fantastic job. He helped me run the company for a year, and then when we went to Optic, he became our Dota manager for that new team. And with the brand new Infinite taking over and Optic kind of taking over and stuff, he um he started taking on a lot more responsibility. And I always tell people, like, people are like, man, how did he just go straight up the ladder? He's now this, I think he was the vice president at Optic when they were still together, and now he's doing like competitive operations for Immortals. He was one
mm,
of the people to survive that kind of transfer from Optic to Immortals, and he's doing a super awesome job, and I'm sure everybody loves him there. But people ask me like, oh, why? How did he do that? Like, he didn't go to college, he didn't do any of this stuff, and it's like he answered emails in a prompt manner. He was on time for appointments and calls. I don't know, and he just did a good job, right? He just wasn't a piece of shit, honestly. Like, that was the thing. And yeah, he's
yeah,
killing it. So if you can get in
yeah.
somewhere and you do a good job, there's a huge opportunity in this space.
I 100% agree. It's nigh on impossible to find the right mindset and the right level of employee in esports. And often the way I explain it is there are a lot of senior business people who want to come into esports that can get paid and command salaries that can't be paid by the current ecosystem that
Oh,
might be a good fit. And there is an umpteenth amount of junior people who want their first job and want to hang out with PPD backstage at TI and not actually do the work that would also like a job. And or there's a lot of account managers who have relevant experience to basically answer emails and tweet out and do social media managing.
yeah.
I'm
Also,
personally finding it very hard, myself and my other friends in similar business situations, to me, to find anywhere from junior to mid to senior level management. That's where a lot of the gap is right now, I feel.
yeah, I agree for sure. And it's funny because because I'm a captain and an organizer in my Dota team, I actually have like pretty decent management skills, right? And so I've had access to a lot of like mid to upper level management positions be offered to me because of my ability to lead a Dota team, which is pretty cool.
Mm.
Um,
It's the age old of I remember this years ago, people discussing in high school putting like World of Warcraft raid leader
yeah,
on
yeah, yeah,
your
yeah.
resume. And that's what you are doing. It's
It's
transcended the
it's
meme,
you
I
know
feel.
what, and if you know what that person's job responsibilities were and how serious they took it or how good they were at it, it might actually be it is a very valuable skill, no doubt. I
Yeah.
was gonna say another thing, and I might imagine my dad is probably watching, and he's gonna love this because we talk about it all the time. Is there's this huge elephant in the room in esports that people just ignore, is that the majority of people who are watching esports and you might think spend money on esports are just sitting in their bedrooms not spending money on anything. They just sit on their computer and play video games. And
Mm.
if your business idea doesn't involve, I don't know, convincing that person to spend money, like, it's probably just a rotten idea. And this whole industry is, what's the word? It's all kind of bullshitting itself to some extent, because you have companies that have esports divisions, and then you have other companies who do esports marketing, and they're all just filling each other's pockets with money. And
Mm.
yeah, it's kind of just perpetuating itself. So at some point, maybe it's going to go away. But otherwise, like, just keep riding it out. Like, I mean, it's going to last for a while, I imagine. But there's
Yeah.
there's definitely some holes.
That's a really good discussion, actually. I've been talking to a lot of people about this recently, and I think in my last podcast, maybe I started to breach the topic publicly, which is if you're creating a new company in the space, are you adding something new? Are you bringing in new revenue to esports, or are you just trying to take from others? So, a direct example would be if you're opening a new tournament organizer, are you just aiming to steal clients from ESL and from other such companies, or are you actually aiming to bring new money into the esports space? The same point if you're opening a new organization. Every day, I'm sure you get messages, I get messages, hey, I want to make the next Team Liquid, want to make the next Cloud9, want to make the next TSM. But what makes you different from those three teams whose main MO is to win tournaments? Why can't you be like FaZe, do something a bit different? Be like 100 Thieves, do something a bit different? Bring new money and bring new ideas into the industry rather than just fighting all for the same piece of the pie.
Definitely. And there'll be 99 of those guys, and hopefully that one person has a different idea and does it the right way, and hopefully they find opportunities to actually make it happen. Because
Mm.
people will find a way to make money, but a majority of people will definitely fall short. That's true in every business. So
Yeah, and I think relying less on the handouts from publishers is a big path going forwards. I think we've seen recently Blizzard with Heroes of the Storm. They had a fairly strong tier 2, tier 3 esports scene, and then they just said goodbye, and that's it. Died overnight kind of thing. So I'm very interested in increasing that sustainability, and I guess that's along the same path and topics that you and I were talking about before as a player. Life after playing. How can you set yourself up? Besides, not everyone can be no tail and win two TIs back to back. Not everyone can win multiple minors and majors like you've done, and things like that too. So, how can you make that sustainability happen for a player? But at the same time, if the player doesn't care or they just don't have time, you just can't make someone care about something they don't want.
absolutely.
So, what's coming up next for you?
We're headed to Ukraine for the upcoming DPC minor, and hopefully we can win and play at the DreamHack Major in Leipzig, Germany.
How close are you guys to locking in your TI appearance? Like, how many majors, how many minors do you have to win to be confident?
Not close at all. It's hard to say. The points are distributed, based on placement at the events. We went to the first minor,
Mm-hmm.
we didn't do well, so we definitely are very far from that before. But last year we got fourth at the first major, and we were pretty much qualified to TI, even with four events, existing after that. So it really just depends on how many of the top teams continue to take those top slots at the majors, and the majority of the points, and that'll determine how good of a placement you need at one or two tournaments in order to make TI. Otherwise, you just play at the qualifiers at the end and you hope for the best. So I try not to think about it too much. I just always put my best foot forward, and that'll inevitably that'll earn you your best placement. And if you make it to TI, great. If you don't, you're still playing Dota, right?
Mm. What about besides being a player? You mentioned before you're running a tournament organization. I assume that doesn't exist anymore. Is there anything else in the wings that you've been thinking about for a while?
No, I was pretty on the of trying to build something inside of Dota, like with all the other Dota players and stuff. But like I said, it's just really hard to get
Mm.
people to care and to get involved on something like that. Um, I'm working. I take on a couple opportunities outside the game. Just I'm doing some advising work at Roundhill Investments, which is like a ETF for esports.
Mm-hmm.
That was one of the opportunities that I decided to just run with, and I'm going to see how it goes. Hopefully it's really cool and everybody likes it. I don't, I know a little bit about it, but obviously I'm not a financial guy. I'm a Dota player. Um, but yeah, I don't know. I always look at opportunities. Usually I say no.
Yeah, makes sense. And if anyone watching or listening to the podcast wants to follow you online, where can they do so? Where's the best place?
The best place would be here on LinkedIn if you're like a business-minded person who might want to learn something from me, or if I can offer you something, maybe that would be great. If you're just like a fan or something, like Twitter is a great place to follow me. And if you're like a super fan, sorry, I'm blurring out here. If you're like a super fan, you can follow my Twitch, and those are all Peter Pandam. I think my LinkedIn might be something different, but it's linked on here, or I'm sure you can find it. So
Fantastic,
yeah.
mate. We're just about to hit an hour. Is there anything we didn't cover today that you might want to chat about? Otherwise, I'm sure we can do this again in a couple of months' time after you've finished your crazy travel schedule.
No, I think I've hit everything that I'm really really passionate about, and a little bit angry about, I guess you could say.
It's great. Look, man, it's the other thing that I find is not just the fact that it's hard to get a player in here. Often I find it's hard to get a player to say their opinions, which is one thing I respect about you that you don't often get. And is that because they're scared? If they talk out too much, players aren't going to get signed to something else. So they just simply don't want what comes with, giving your opinion.
Yeah, there can be a lot of baggage around giving your opinion for sure. I've always been really opinionated, most partially because I'm selfish for attention. I like to be the center of attention in the spotlight. Also just because I've been able to build myself a brand through having opinions on things. It's whatever.
Mm.
Like, but the cool thing about building my own brand is that when I don't have a team, or when I'm looking for a new team, people message me and give me opportunities and offers. So I'm not out there chasing. I've never not had a contract in Dota. And yeah, as much as people give me shit for maybe saying the wrong thing every once in a while, it's done a lot more for me, and it's kind of raised my level of exposure than it would otherwise. So yeah, nah, I just want to be right,
Mm.
and I want people to hear how smart I am, occasionally, or at least it's fun to experience that. So I think I have a lot to offer sometimes, or a lot to offer when it comes to like esports and Dota and the whole
Mm.
system. So I'm happy to like, I don't know, like talk about it. Maybe some of it's bullshit, but you got to believe somebody at some point. So have faith that I know what I'm talking about.
Is there anyone else like you in Dota 2 that I should follow, or anyone listening?
Um, I think it would be really hard to get other people to talk about some of the stuff that I've talked about on here, but probably No Tail is just the best one. Maybe I don't think Puppy would do it or give time. I don't think Kura would do it or give time. Trying to think of other people. Um, I don't know, man. It's really tough. Like the people
Sure. Well,
sometimes the people that are willing to do it just don't have a lot to say. And
yeah.
when you do something like this, it's almost like a performance, right? Like I'm on webcam here trying to say things that people want to hear, or maybe just give information that I think is relevant for others to listen to. And that in itself is kind of a lot, really, just really intimidating for lots of Dota players.
Well, I thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule. Obviously, you've got a bit of a break coming up now, but
Yeah, I'm on
like I
vacation
said,
right now.
it's perfect. And like I said, it's really hard to get a player, and I've been trying for a long time because there's so many times when I'm in these business meetings with people, people are sprouting, spruiking their bull crap about Jota Pro, about how much they know about the industry, and so many times I'm thinking they're being like, I don't even know what the players want right now. I don't know what the pro players, and we're trying to make decisions for them. I feel like it's politicians that don't talk to their constituents sometimes. So thank you for coming on and, giving some of that back end and insider info into the scene.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. And thanks to everybody who listened as well.
Yeah, no worries, mate. Yeah. And like I said, happy to have you on another time. And hopefully we can do this again. But thanks, Pete. And thanks for everyone for listening in to the LinkedIn live stream and into the podcast. As always, there'll be plenty more guests coming out, and we've got some pretty interesting announcements coming soon. Thanks for listening, guys. See you soon.